Did the old lady die? That's what the man asked, but it made me really mad. He was my ex-husband who left his blind mom to be with his new girlfriend. It's crazy to think he came from my kind mother-in-law. His words made me so angry. You must have had it tough too, right? Now you can do whatever you want, but I guess there's only so much an old lady like you can do. He laughed loudly and rudely, making it hard to show how mad I was. I just smiled back at him. Well, I actually just inherited $3 million, so I'm going to enjoy my freedom, I said, wiping the smirk off my ex-husband's face. He never thought he'd end up needing my forgiveness someday. My name is Grace, and I'm 63 years old now. I got married when I was young and moved in with my in-laws. They were kind people, but unfortunately, my husband turned out to be a big letdown. I divorced him when I was 53. At that time, our daughter Mary was 18, and our son Jack was 15. It was a tough time because we had to pay for their education, and I also had to take care of my blind mother-in-law. I met my ex-husband John at work. I was 18 when I joined the company, and he was 24, already a senior there. He seemed reliable and caring, which I admired. Despite being popular, he liked me and asked me out. When we decided to get married, I met his parents. His dad had trouble moving around, and his mom couldn't see. I was touched to see John taking care of them while working. Even though my parents were worried about my future, seeing how much John cared for his parents made me ignore their concerns and marry him. My parents were upset and cut ties with me, but I was confident in my decision. Being young, I wasn't scared of anything. After getting married, I decided to quit my job so I could take care of my in-laws and manage our household. My husband, John, was grateful for this arrangement as it allowed him to focus on his work. My in-laws treated me like their own daughter and always showed appreciation for what I did. Even though taking care of them was challenging, their kindness made it easier to bear. John worked late every day, so I believed everything was going smoothly at home. One day, while at the grocery store, I bumped into one of John's former colleagues. We chatted about John and me, and the colleague mentioned how John always left work early because he was worried about me, which made him a great husband. I was puzzled because John usually came home late, not early. I thought it must have been a misunderstanding, so I just smiled awkwardly and agreed. When I got home, I brought it up with John, intending to subtly address the issue. But before I could finish, John got defensive and yelled at me, saying he was working hard and not just goofing off. He brushed off my concerns about his father needing more care, showing no willingness to help. This made me feel unsupported and frustrated by his reaction. I had a feeling something wasn't right, but I was too scared to confront my husband about it. I had gone against my parents' wishes to marry him, so I didn't have a backup plan if things went wrong. Plus, I was worried about my in-laws. So I just kept living each day as usual. Then, I had an idea to buy an electric wheelchair for my father-in-law. He was managing with a cane and a manual wheelchair, but with an electric one, he could move around more easily. And if I put my blind mother-in-law in the wheelchair and pushed her, we could go for walks farther from home. When I brought it up with my husband, I expected him to agree, but he wasn't too keen. He said we couldn't afford it with his income being tight. While it was true that we weren't wealthy, I felt the wheelchair would bring joy to my in-laws, so I suggested borrowing money from the bank and repaying it later with their pension. My husband reluctantly agreed, warning me not to cause trouble. I couldn't tell my in-laws exactly what he said. But when I mentioned we could borrow from the bank, my father-in-law was thrilled. So we went to the bank together, got a loan, and bought the wheelchair. My in-laws were overjoyed with their new mobility aid. Not long after, my father-in-law passed away, leaving me and my mother-in-law deeply saddened. But instead of offering comfort, John complained about the debt from buying the wheelchair. His words made me feel guilty, especially knowing my mother-in-law likely overheard. Now, it was just me and her at home. With her blindness, she could handle some things on her own, reducing my caregiving duties significantly. Around this time, John suggested we have children. I was unsure about his intentions, but I hoped it meant a positive change. We ended up having 2 children, but unfortunately, John didn't become more involved with household tasks even after they were born. My days were a whirlwind of chores and childcare. Despite it all, seeing my mother-in-law happy brought me comfort, especially when she heard the laughter of our children. After my father-in-law's death, we managed to find some happiness, but there were signs our marriage was struggling. John seemed distant, always late coming home, and showing little affection for my mother-in-law or the kids. He even started working on his days off, with no joy on his face. I began to accept that as long as he provided financially, maybe that was enough. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but our children grew up to be good-hearted and honest. Our family faced a big change when our daughter turned 18 and was heading off to college. On a Saturday, which was supposed to be a day off for John, he announced he was going to work. I had to remind him that he promised to take my mother-in-law to the hospital for her checkup. This was something we had planned for a few days, and it was also the day our daughter was moving into her college dorm. But John snapped at me, saying it was my job as a housewife to take care of such things. He claimed he needed to help our daughter set up for college. This outburst surprised me, and I couldn't believe he was being so insensitive. I'd never talked back to him before, but his attitude made me furious. He seemed taken aback by my reaction and continued to argue, saying hurtful things about why he married me in the first place. His words stung, and I felt regret for ever marrying him. I couldn't bear his insults anymore, so I simply told him to stop. I realized I couldn't expect anything from him anymore. He seemed satisfied that I didn't argue back and left, saying I should take care of my mother-in-law and the kids. After that, he never came back home again. It was a painful realization that our marriage was falling apart. In the end, I had my eldest daughter take care of her dorm move-in while I accompanied my mother-in-law to her health checkup. Despite the absence of my husband, we managed to get through the day. Everyone noticed he didn't come back, but nobody spoke about it. A few days later, a letter arrived from him, containing a divorce notice and a message stating he was leaving to live with his lover. He also mentioned he didn't want to be involved in the debts left by my in-laws and that we could live our lives as we pleased. I felt exhausted and realized I would be happier without him. Before filing for divorce, I informed my children and my mother-in-law about the situation. My mother-in-law was deeply shocked and apologized repeatedly while crying. She expressed her intention to move out, feeling like a stranger now that we were getting divorced. But I reassured her, saying she was just like my real mother and the only grandmother my children knew. I insisted that we were still a family and didn't need to worry about our future. Despite her tears, she thanked me for my words. However, I couldn't deny my worries. Even though my husband wasn't perfect, his financial contribution was still valuable. Now that he was gone, I felt uncertain about our future. I desperately searched for a job, but nobody would hire me because I had been a housewife for many years. Both Mary and Jack offered to work, but I felt like I had to find a way to support us. However, my mother-in-law surprised us by telling me not to worry about working and to focus on going back to school if I wanted. She assured me that she would take care of everything. We were puzzled by her offer, but she insisted, and our lives continued without any major changes. If anything, it felt like we could live more comfortably than when my husband was around. I decided to file for divorce with the help of a lawyer. My mother-in-law wanted to report him missing, but I had no desire to see him again. Surely she must want to see her son, my ex-husband, I thought. But even after she reported him missing, my ex-husband was never found. About 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away to join my father-in-law. Sadly, she never got to reunite with my ex-husband during her lifetime, even though he's her son. I felt like I should contact him, but when I tried to find his address, there was nobody living there. Reluctantly, we held a small funeral for my mother-in-law with just the three of us. And now, unexpectedly, my ex-husband stands before me. I saw him while I was out shopping alone. At first, I thought I had mistaken him for someone else and tried to ignore him, but he kept staring at me. It's probably not a mistake, I thought, deciding to ignore him, but he persisted, saying, "Grace, right? You're as glum as ever. How rude." The woman next to him laughed softly, adding to my irritation. Just as I was about to walk past them, he said, "Did the poor old hag already kick the bucket?" I stopped in my tracks, glaring at my ex-husband. "Who are you calling a poor old hag?" I asked sharply. He smirked and replied, "You know who I mean, right? Your blind mother-in-law. Heard she passed away. Must have been tough for you, but hey, now you're free to do whatever." Well, within limits, I guess. His crude laughter grated on my nerves, but I knew showing anger would only give him satisfaction, so I forced a smile and replied, "Actually, I inherited $3 million, so I don't have to work anymore. I'm enjoying my freedom, thanks." The smirk on his face disappeared at my unexpected response. "See ya," I said, turning to leave. But he seemed stunned, calling out to me hurriedly, wait a minute. An inheritance of $3 million. What are you talking about? He asked incredulously. What am I talking about? I mean exactly what I said. Thanks to your disappearance, I was able to inherit smoothly without you in the picture, I replied with a hint of satisfaction. My ex-husband's face went pale. You're kidding me. I'm her son, right? I didn't hear about any inheritance. I should have a right to get a share too, he insisted. I couldn't help but smirk. Well, technically yes, but you were gone. Did you know that after 7 years of disappearance you are considered legally dead? I said, enjoying the turn of events. What? So your mother-in-law's inheritance was willed to me, your eldest son, and eldest daughter. You have no role in this anymore, I asserted confidently. My ex-husband looked utterly bewildered, and I had to resist the urge to burst out laughing. I now understood why my mother-in-law had urged me to file a missing persons report after she passed away. A lawyer representing her estate appeared and explained everything to me. It turned out that my mother-in-law's family were landowners, but she had cut ties with them, much like I had with my own family. However, she still had the right to inherit. When her parents passed away, she inherited without telling anyone. Thanks to this unexpected windfall, we were able to live without financial worries. I once asked my mother-in-law, Mrs. Young, how are you managing your money? If it's a pension or something like that, please use it however you like. Her response was simple yet profound. I'm using it as I please to live a happy life with my family. And that's exactly what we did. I knew the money my mother-in-law had wasn't from a pension, judging by how freely she spent it. But it was definitely hers. Even though we were struggling financially, we decided to accept her generosity gratefully. Her inheritance was far more than she could ever spend in her lifetime. The only problem was my husband's presence. If something were to happen to her, he would inherit everything. But she didn't want that. During a consultation with a lawyer, my husband vanished. She thought he had finally cut ties with us. While she was sad to leave us, she planned to move into a nursing home with assisted living and use up most of her inheritance so she wouldn't leave any problems behind. However, my eldest son, eldest daughter, and I all expressed that we saw her as family and wanted to continue living together. This brought her immense happiness. Wanting to pass on her inheritance to us, she followed her attorney's advice and filed a missing person report for my husband. Following the law, my husband left home, and after 7 years, he was legally treated as if he had passed away. 1 year later, when my mother-in-law passed away, her inheritance was passed on to her oldest son and daughter. Even though I didn't have a right to inherit in place of my husband, my mother-in-law made sure to include me in her will. Thanks to her love and foresight, we were able to receive her generous legacy. Because of her, your mom paid for all of Jack's and Mary's school fees and living costs. That's why we could live happily. I thanked my ex-husband for leaving. When I said this to my ex-husband, he looked really surprised with his mouth wide open. He deserved it. Later, my ex-husband contacted me, saying he should get some of the money from the inheritance. I couldn't believe how mean he was after all these years, but legally, there's no inheritance for someone who's officially declared dead. I've told him this many times, but he still wants to argue about it. I spoke with a lawyer about my ex-husband's request to inherit. The lawyer explained that to inherit anything, my ex-husband would need to go through several legal steps, like canceling the missing person report. Usually in cases like ours, grandchildren end up inheriting the estate. We had no plans to give my ex-husband any money. I told him exactly what the lawyer said. If he wanted to inherit, he'd have to pay inheritance tax too. When I mentioned all these procedures to him, he went quiet. Our kids were there too, and we talked it over. I can't take time off work. I can't deal with all these legal steps, and I shouldn't have to pay inheritance tax. You guys should just give me my share. I helped you all out, so you owe me this much. My ex-husband argued. I was really upset by his stubbornness. It turns out he's just working day-to-day jobs now and can't even afford to take a day off. The company he worked for when we were married let him go because he was always absent. When I asked why he left his job and why he's struggling financially, he admitted he owed money to an old flame. He's been doing odd jobs and moving around a lot to pay off his debt. I get it, he insisted, but even with his explanation, I couldn't make sense of it. So things didn't work out with that other woman, huh? Then who was the woman you were with the other day? I asked. She's the one I've been searching for, my ex-husband mumbled quietly. When I heard this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. My oldest son, my eldest daughter, and I were stunned into silence. Shaking my head at his foolishness, I told my ex-husband, "You're not young anymore. Stop acting like it." "She's my true love," he insisted. When he said that, I realized trying to reason with him was pointless. After reconnecting with my ex-husband, I discovered where he lives now. Turns out, he's staying in an apartment in the nearby town. But it's in his girlfriend's name. My oldest son ended up buying the entire building and became the landlord. "We have the money Grandma gave us. It didn't make sense to leave it sitting there," my son explained. Investing in real estate seemed like a better idea. Initially, I thought he wanted to assist his father, but that wasn't the case at all. Instead, if the rent is even slightly late, he's quick to demand it. The previous landlord might have been lenient, but my son doesn't operate like that. "You've caused your mother more than enough trouble. You selfishly picked this path, so you should face even more hardship than she did," my eldest son declared. It seemed like my son's way of penalizing his father, who had never been much of a dad. The kids surely had their own opinions about it. Perhaps that's why he couldn't handle this situation anymore. My ex-husband came to our house, pleading for forgiveness. "I'm truly sorry. I neglected my duties as a parent and a partner, Grace. I was wrong," he admitted. I couldn't help but let out a sigh as I watched my ex-husband's desperation. But I also had my own life to focus on. "Can't you talk to Jack and ask him to give me a break on the rent?" He looked so upset when he asked, my ex-husband pleaded. "If you had been a better father to our kids, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation, failing as a son, a husband, and a father. What do you have left in your life now? What was it all for?" "You need to seriously think about that," I responded. My words left my ex-husband speechless, and he walked away without saying anything. He looked so small as he left. Eventually, my ex-husband got kicked out of his apartment because he couldn't pay the rent. His new place seems to be in an old building where it's chilly and drafty. He's still living day to day, taking whatever jobs he can find. On the day we reconnected, he apparently ended things with the woman he was living with when he left our apartment. It seems he was covering her living expenses even after he got kicked out for not paying rent. I suppose it couldn't be helped. Instead, he should probably be grateful that his girlfriend stayed with him for as long as she did. She was young and maybe didn't see his true colors, much like I did when we were together. As for us, we're doing really well now. Thanks to my mother-in-law's money, as my oldest son suggested, we invested in real estate and stocks, so we have a steady income without having to work too hard. We even have time for fun things like traveling every month. Plus, my eldest daughter, Mary, is getting married. Her fiancé is wonderful and treats her wonderfully. Our family and happiness are growing. I'm savoring the joy of today, which we achieved by overcoming our past struggles.
My mom cooks way better than yours. Some of us leaned back in our chairs while others sat up straight. There were 4 of us around the table, and it was loaded with fancy food. Usually we wouldn't have such an extravagant meal, but today we were dining with the in-laws, so it was a special occasion. Keith looked at me with a smug smile on his face, even as he ate. "But this food was made by me, wasn't it?" "Your usual mistress's cooking is terrible," he remarked. My response spilled out, directed at Keith's comment. I glanced at my in-laws, trying to gauge their reactions. They looked puzzled, and the atmosphere in the room became tense. It felt like time stopped for a moment, and no one could move or speak, holding their forks in their hands. I realized there was no need to keep hiding. I didn't want to continue my relationship with Keith and his parents. I was the only one feeling this bitterness, but I was ready to fight back. I had planned to get back at Keith during today's gathering for a while now. That's why I had left our daughter with my parents. I didn't want her to witness this ugly side of me or be affected by it. My goal was to get revenge on Keith, and I was secretly pleased about it. My name is Rachel Davis. I'm 34 years old, and my daughter Nag just started elementary school. I'm your average housewife, living comfortably without any major troubles. Even though I have the means to live luxuriously, I'm not overly greedy. All I want is to be happy with my husband, Keith. On the surface, people might think we're a happy couple, but there's something that's been bothering me. Keith, who turned 39 this year, has been coming home late recently. It's been a norm for him to come home late since we got married. Keith works for a well-known company, and I know he's given important responsibilities. I assume there must be valid reasons for him not coming home early. I've always supported Keith and never accused him of anything, even though he deals with a lot of stress from work. He tries his best for our family, often planning trips for us on his days off. Despite the stress, we've never had arguments like other couples might. I've made up my mind to go somewhere tomorrow. I'd apologize for springing this on you suddenly. It's okay. I understand your situation with your husband. So what exactly do you need me to look into? Timothy asked as we sat on opposite couches, lost in thought. He spread some documents on the glass table in front of me. We have a plan to gather evidence through photos and our staff getting close to your husband, Timothy explained carefully, outlining the details of the plan. If that's the case, I'm on board with this option, I said, pointing to the plan written in the documents and nodding in agreement. At the moment, I was in the city, having visited a detective agency located in a back alley not far from downtown. Timothy Rogers, the detective assigned to my case, sat across from me, dressed in a black suit. Since yesterday, I couldn't shake off the suspicion that Keith might be cheating on me. Turning to a professional detective seemed like the best option. I didn't want to discuss my doubts about my husband with just anyone. But the urge to uncover the truth was stronger, so I explained the events leading up to this point. What does your husband do for work? Timothy inquired. He holds a managerial position in sales at a major corporation, I replied cautiously. He's like a department head. Understood. I won't ask for the company's name right now, Timothy assured me. I don't want to involve unnecessary people in this matter. That's appreciated, I responded. Typically, he works at the sales branch. If he works there, I'd like to know the company's name, Timothy requested. I'll tell you, but please promise not to tell anyone else, I said nervously, grabbing a pen and quickly jotting down the name on a notepad. This company is quite prominent, isn't it? Timothy remarked. Yes, that's why I was hesitant to mention it, I admitted. Please keep it confidential. Of course, we don't want to cause any harm to the company, Timothy assured me. This is strictly personal. 2 weeks later, I returned to the detective agency and met with Timothy again. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your husband is cheating, he revealed. Oh really? I gasped in surprise, feeling a mix of emotions. It was like I had resigned myself to this possibility, yet the confirmation still hurt deeply. Despite the pain, I felt a sense of duty to accept the truth. Despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me, I managed to keep a composed facade. What's your next move? Do you want to continue the investigation further? Timothy asked. Yes, please. I want to dig deeper, I replied, even though my heart felt heavy. So, we'll need to get more involved. Are you sure about that? Timothy questioned. Yes, I am, I affirmed, though I felt like my heart was sinking into darkness. I wanted to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. At this point, the affair is confirmed, Timothy confirmed, and there were times when your husband stayed with the woman he was having the affair with, not just for work reasons. His words ignited anger within me, but I pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. Do you want to see the photographic evidence now or later? Timothy asked. Show it to me, I requested, my voice trembling. Timothy handed me a photo from a brown envelope. As I looked at it, I saw Keith entering his mistress's house. The woman seemed to be around my age, but she appeared younger and more attractive. Keith looked happier with her than he did with me. My daughter Naomi's earlier observation wasn't a lie. She was only in first grade, and I didn't want to disrupt her life with a divorce. But I couldn't stay with a cheating husband either. If the affair affected Naomi negatively, it would be too late. Suppressing my pain, I made a decision. I need as much information as you can provide, I told Timothy. All right then, we'll proceed with the investigation for about 2 months. Is that okay with you? Timothy asked. Yes, I have enough money for it. Please, I need you to do this, I said firmly, meeting Timothy's gaze. But suddenly, a voice interrupted us. Hey, don't you go making decisions on your own. All you do is lie, the voice accused. No, it's the truth, I replied firmly, ready to face whatever came next. Now that I'm at Keith's parents' house without Naomi, I can fully respond to Keith's accusations. I haven't lied or deceived my parents-in-law, so why should I hide the truth? Besides, there's no benefit for me in doing so. A few days before coming here, I received a report from Timothy confirming that the investigation was completed. All the information from the detective was in the bag next to me. Keith can't deny it, and once the evidence is presented, his parents should understand. But I needed to be cautious. Knowing Keith's tendency to deceive, I decided to reveal the truth to his parents while observing the situation. "You're crazy. My son would never cheat. You just keep lying," Keith's father exclaimed, his voice echoing inside the room. Just moments ago, we were having a pleasant conversation, but a minor disagreement between Keith and me escalated the situation, making the atmosphere tense. I had only mentioned that Keith hadn't been coming home for the past 6 months, but he immediately got defensive and accused me of lying. It was me who triggered this, but my resentment towards my husband ran deep. I had come to this gathering with feelings of revenge. "According to my son, you can't even manage household chores properly. You're just at home and yet you don't do anything," Keith's mother chimed in, echoing her son's accusations. "That's a misunderstanding," I replied firmly, pushing down my feelings and locking eyes with Keith's father, even though his expression was intimidating. "Your son is lying." "Misunderstanding? Are you suggesting my son is lying?" Keith's father challenged. "Yes," I continued speaking, determined to stand my ground. "That's ridiculous. My son is a light. I've always provided him with a good education and quality meals. Moreover, I've taught him to be respectful and not to be a bother to others. Do you think someone like him would cheat? It's impossible." But Keith's father stubbornly refused to acknowledge what his son had done. Perhaps it was his lack of knowledge about the situation that made him unwilling to accept the truth, but Robert's demeanor grew increasingly tense. I was just about to present the evidence when Susan, who had always been kind to me, spoke up. "I used to trust you, but after this incident, I just can't anymore," she said, her tone filled with disappointment. Susan had been kind to me since I arrived early at their home today. She had even recommended Keith to marry me. Susan and my mother were old friends, so her kindness was expected. However, now she looked at me with suspicion, as if I were a criminal. "If things are really that bad, we might have to consider divorce," Susan suggested, almost sighing. I didn't want to bring up divorce. Our family runs a well-known company, and if people find out that someone like me is Keith's wife, it could tarnish our reputation. In about 10 years, Keith will become the CEO, and then we won't be able to ignore it anymore. Susan continued, her expression apologetic. "And she can't even cook properly for me." "That's not true," Keith interjected, defending his mother's accusation. "Your cooking tastes bad." In the room where the four of us were, Keith arrogantly picked up his fork and began eating. His attitude irritated me even more. "Actually, my mom's cooking is way better than yours," Keith laughed, trying to provoke me. "But that was made by me though, isn't it? Your usual mistress whose cooking is awful," he added, stunning me with his remark. The atmosphere in the room became tense, and I felt the need to excuse myself. Both sets of parents-in-law looked shocked, their mouths hanging open. Keith also widened his eyes in realization, dropping the grilled fish from his fork. He had set down his fork onto the table. "What do you mean?" Susan questioned, her tone filled with concern. "Just what I said," I replied smoothly. "As I've been saying, the one lying is my husband." "Hey, stop making stuff up." Keith slammed his fork on the table, yelling. "It's not a lie. Plus, I cooked the grilled fish after I came here this morning, in place of your mother. You and your father wouldn't know since you arrived in the afternoon," he added defensively. As I explained, Keith grew even more irritated, his face turning bright red. "Want to see the evidence? If you have it, show it," he challenged, standing up abruptly. "All right, I'll show you then," I responded, taking a more serious tone. "What? No, you must be lying. That's just nonsense," Keith protested, but I remained serious. "Well, anyway, I haven't done anything wrong," Keith muttered quietly, sitting back down. "You know what'll happen if you're lying, right?" Robert shouted, his anger evident. "First off, calm down. Does Rachel really have evidence?" Susan interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. In that moment, Susan was the only one able to think rationally. I reached into my bag and took out an envelope containing photos and a letter-sized paper from Timothy, the detective. Placing them on the table, I could see my husband's face turn pale as he watched my move. "No, it's not like that," Keith protested, desperate to avoid confronting the truth, repeatedly denying it. "What is this? What does it mean?" Robert demanded, visibly agitated. "It's nothing, Keith covered his ears, refusing to face reality. These photos, who's this person? Don't tell me you've really been cheating, Robert questioned, disbelief evident in his voice. Yes, that's right. That's why I have these photos taken as evidence. This isn't fabricated. I've also consulted with an attorney. I explained calmly in response to Robert's remarks. If we decide to divorce, it'll be handled according to the law, I stated without hesitation. I harbored a deep-seated intention to make Keith pay for his actions. This could tarnish my company's reputation. Robert's voice grew weak, the earlier momentum now a distant memory. What's the truth? Susan asked, her tone filled with concern. Keith covered his face with both hands, unwilling to accept reality. However, he could no longer avoid the undeniable truth. Slowly, his distressed expression began to show, indicating his struggle to regain composure. All right, I'll talk, Keith finally said, slumping as if exhausted. I cheated, but it's not entirely my fault. From the beginning, Keith tried to justify himself. I originally had someone I loved. Yeah, I had never mentioned this before. Before I met you, before Mom introduced you to me. Why did you choose me then? I questioned, taken aback. Because it looked good socially, Keith spoke with difficulty, then glanced at his parents. Dad wanted me to get married soon, so I was set up with someone Mom recommended. If you loved someone, why didn't you tell me? Robert demanded, his anger evident. It was someone I met about 10 years ago. She worked at a nightlife spot. Given that my father runs a major company, I couldn't openly discuss it, Keith admitted, revealing a truth I had never known. I see, a nightlife spot. Well, in that case, I probably would have opposed the marriage, Robert acknowledged. So it's not entirely my fault. Actually, I wanted to marry her, Keith confessed, shocking me. We'd lived together for several years, even had a child, but all this time, Keith never truly loved me, I realized, feeling the weight of his words hit me hard. She told me it'd be okay if we got married this year, so I thought this was my chance, Keith explained further. What are you talking about? Chance for what? Susan asked, her confusion evident. It was my last shot at marrying her. Plus, I thought if I badmouthed Rachel, Dad and Mom would agree to our divorce. Keith admitted, his frustration evident. I'm sick of it all. The societal expectations and all that. I just want to live a simple life. I'd rather spend my life with that woman than with our family. A pang of sympathy washed over me as I realized Keith had been carrying the weight of stress for our family all these years. However, it dawned on me that our relationship was merely a facade for him. When I realized that our relationship lacked genuine love and was merely for appearances, it became increasingly painful. What are you going to do about your marriage? Susan asked, breaking the tense silence. I'm going to get a divorce, I replied firmly. Do you have any idea how much money I've spent on you? Robert's anger flared. Hey, stop it. Are you taking his side now? Susan interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. We've never heard his true feelings before. He's always followed our advice and did the right thing even back in his college days. What about my business? I won't accept it unless he marries someone suitable, Robert declared, his fury toward Keith showing no signs of abating. I'm sorry, Keith's voice quivered in pain. Just saying sorry won't cut it, Robert retorted sternly. But don't you think it's enough that he's finally been honest with us? Susan intervened, gently prodding Robert to calm down emotionally. I'm getting a divorce, so I'll be taking over my company. What is your answer? Robert asked Keith with an angry expression. I can't take it over anymore, Keith admitted. I see. Are you prepared to take full responsibility? Robert questioned, seeking confirmation. It might be tough, but I'll figure something out, Keith replied. Do as you please. I won't say a thing. From today, you're no longer part of this family. Remember that, Robert declared, leaving the dining table in disbelief. I'm truly sorry, Keith expressed deep regret to me, begging for forgiveness. But no matter the circumstances, I couldn't forgive Keith for upending my life. I was set on getting a divorce and planned to seek child support, otherwise I wouldn't be able to suppress my feelings of resentment. I called the attorney I had spoken with earlier that day, and the divorce proceedings with Keith began the next day. A few months have passed since then, and although I can't live as comfortably as before, I believe my life has improved. I feel better about my current situation. Mom, I'm off. Be careful, honey, I called out as Naomi headed off to school. Now in the second grade, she was growing up fast. As a single mom, I had to start working again. But it was still better than living with Keith, who had no love for us. After ensuring Naomi was safely off to school, I headed to work. The company I work for is managed by my father-in-law. I reconciled with my parents-in-law, and they've been a great support, helping me in various ways. Through their assistance, I was able to join my current company. However, I didn't know what had become of Keith after the divorce. He went to the person he had an affair with and never returned home. Keith had always had a decent amount of money, so the child support was paid promptly. Later on, through grapevine, I heard of someone resembling Keith wandering the streets at night alone, looking haggard with a pained expression. I didn't dwell on it. Whatever happened to a man who lost everything didn't matter to me now. My duty was to work hard for Naomi, letting go of the past. I took the first step into a new life. A wife works like a maid for her husband. If she doesn't listen to him, they might get divorced. I'm really mad, I told someone. My husband Tom took my special credit card and spent lots of money without asking me. He knew I was busy with work. They're on a vacation overseas. I feel really disrespected. I didn't answer Tom's phone call. Instead, I started planning how to get back at him. I'm Holly Smith. I used to be a famous actress in the USA. People all over the world loved me, and I even made it big in Hollywood. I was famous for many years. But then I got married to Tom, who used to be my manager and helper. He took care of everything for me, from my health to my personal life. He's still helping me with my fashion stores now. I quit acting 10 years ago when I was 21. When I decided to stop acting while I was still really famous, it caused a big stir in the media. Fans were coming to my house, and I was getting tons of letters begging me to keep going. Despite all the gossip and rumors, Tom and I got married happily, and everyone was supportive. Just before I quit acting, I started my own fashion brand. Now, Tom works for me in finance, and I focus on running the business, making sure our models do well. Everything seemed great, but lately Tom's been acting strange. He looks tired and defeated all the time at home. Tom, what's going on? You don't seem yourself. Is something wrong at work? I knew he didn't like talking about his problems, so I always checked in on him. It could be tiring, but he always helped me with my problems too, so I didn't mind. Even though I often felt annoyed, I always valued Tom's efforts. You know, I'm tired of always being in the background, doing what you want, he suddenly said, surprising me. What's going on? You've never said anything like this before. I responded. Tom would sometimes vent his frustrations at me, but it was because he was stressed from work. He acted tough at his job, so maybe he had nowhere else to let off steam. I remembered how I used to snap at him when I was an actress, so I could empathize with how he felt. Still, his words caught me off guard, and I felt my voice trembling as I replied. I've been holding back. You're always busy, and I'm just here supporting you. Even though Tom earned more than most people, he was still just an employee in our company. I made more money, but I never thought it mattered who earned more in a marriage. His words surprised me. Even when you're home, you're always focused on work and hardly pay attention to me. When we go shopping, you just buy whatever you want. How do you think that makes me feel? Tom looked dissatisfied, his lips pressed together like a frustrated child. Honestly, his words irritated me. Most of our household expenses came from my income. His salary was his to spend as he pleased. As I reminded him, it was my way of thanking him for all his support and hard work. There were times when Tom supported me financially, especially when we didn't have much money. I wanted to thank him for all the times he put his own needs aside for me, even until I retired. It hurt to hear him sound ungrateful. The things I buy come from the savings I manage. If anything, I'm the one making sacrifices, I thought angrily. Holly, you have too much free time. I want more time off and to travel leisurely. The salary's good since I joined your company, but I never have time, he complained. When I left acting and started my own business, Tom said he'd keep managing actors. But when my business did well, he wanted to work with me. If I work with you, Holly, you won't be lonely. I want to be there for you, he said. I wanted to spend time with him, so I let him join. I never asked him to, so why was he acting like this? Wasn't our life good enough for him? Wasn't he being too selfish? As I thought this, Tom asked for time off to celebrate his parents' 60th anniversary. Can I have 2 weeks off to take them on a trip to Japan? He asked. They've never been, And I want to show them the tasty food and beautiful sights, he said. I braced myself for his response, but his request surprised me, leaving me feeling uneasy. 2 weeks off seemed like a simple request he could easily make it work without causing any trouble. Our company was fair, and taking time off wasn't usually a problem. Yet here he was, making a big deal about it and negotiating directly with me. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I tried to push aside my irritation and replied calmly, I'm fine with that, but it won't work this year. I have important events lined up, like a fashion show, and preparing for the Paris collection. Maybe we can plan it for next year when my schedule is more flexible. I want to be there for my in-laws celebration, but work is really busy this year. I suggested a different date, but Tom refused with a smile. It's okay, we'll celebrate with my family. I just want some quality family time, he said. His words stung, suggesting that I was a burden. So, what do you think? Don't I deserve some time off too? Tom often spoke without thinking, and while it was one of his flaws, I accepted him as my partner, flaws and all. But I couldn't ignore how his words hurt me, even if he didn't mean it. Why does he talk to me like this? Doesn't he care about me? As I pondered, Tom interrupted, Hey Holly, are you listening to me? I owe a lot to Tom's parents. Even though I couldn't visit them often because of work, Tom's parents always treated me like their own daughter and praised my work. We're so lucky to have such a wonderful daughter, his mother said when I married into the family, and his father celebrated our marriage with joy. It was their 60th anniversary celebration, and I understood their desire to celebrate it this year. But how could I agree happily after being spoken to like that? It doesn't matter to me, take 1 week or 2, do as you like. I couldn't hide my anger and let it show. This seemed to upset Tom. He got up, visibly upset, and left the room without a word. We had been sleeping in separate bedrooms due to work, and from that day until his trip, we didn't see each other at all. Is that really true? Isn't your husband being too harsh? My secretary, noticing my unusual behavior the day Tom left for his trip, pressed me for details. She's an exceptional talent and has been supporting me since I started managing the company. As women, we often see eye to eye, and sometimes she's even more reliable than my husband. She's quick-witted yet caring, always there to support me when I'm down or about to make a mistake. I cherish her like family. She admires me like a real sister, and I often confide in her. Her honest and mature advice, beyond her years, is always valuable. And this time too, she noticed something was off about me and kindly showed concern. I hesitated at first about opening up, but realized keeping it in could affect my work. I decided to tell her everything that happened up to today. She furrowed her brow in anger. If I were you, I'd have given him a piece of my mind. You've been too soft on your husband, boss. I get that you love him, but you can't let him walk all over you. Her blunt advice, making me wonder who's older, hit me hard. In an environment where everyone tends to hold back from telling me things, she's the only one who treats me as an equal. I really appreciate her directness and the ease we have in our conversations. Being in a higher position often requires humility and restraint, so having someone who can speak honestly with me like she does is incredibly valuable. You're right. What should I do? I asked. Can't you call him? Why not talk after work today? Don't worry about ruining his trip. If things keep going like this, you might end up getting divorced. She urged me, sounding like an older sister, leaving me with no choice but to agree. As she suggested, I plan to call him right after work. He's in Japan, so there's a significant time difference of about 15 hours from the US. For example, if it's 5:00 p.m. here, it's 8:00 a.m. there, which should be around breakfast time. I had sent him an email earlier to let him know I needed to talk, so he should be expecting my call. I tried calling, hoping he would answer, but there was no response. Maybe he's still busy with everyone. I'll try again later. Despite calling every 30 minutes, there was still no answer. Worried, I decided to contact my mother-in-law to check on him. Hello, Holly, you must be tired. I'm sorry we went on this trip without you. We wanted you to come, but Tom insisted otherwise, she said. I knew Tom's mother used to be strict, but now she's much more caring and always worries about my busy schedule. It's okay. We're swamped at the company this year, so I couldn't make it. I'll make it up to you next year, all right? I assured her. Oh, don't worry about it. Just having this wonderful trip as a gift from you is more than enough for us. Her kind words surprised me. Wait, a gift? I asked, confused. She seemed surprised by my question and then explained that Tom told them the trip was paid for by me since I couldn't join. I was shocked to hear this news. What? I exclaimed over the phone. My mother-in-law realized I didn't know anything about it from my reaction and quickly clarified, "Isn't this the trip wholly arranged? Tom paid for everything with Holly's card, so I thought it was from you." The trip included Tom's parents and his sister's family, 5 people in total. The flight alone cost about $1,000 per person minimum, not to mention other expenses, easily exceeding $10,000. It was outrageous to spend such a large amount without consulting me, especially since I usually cover living expenses. Tom doesn't gamble or smoke, so his salary should be intact. He definitely earns enough to afford such expenses, yet he didn't. With him not answering my calls, my anger started to boil. My mother-in-law noticed my distress and spoke with concern. "Holly, are you all right? We'll reimburse every cent." Tom insisted on covering everything, which seemed strange to us. "My husband and I decided we'll repay you later. We miss you and plan to visit soon. This trip might have been a mistake." With these words, my mother-in-law tried to reassure me. "You're not to blame. It's also your 6th-day celebration, so please use that money for your enjoyment. I'll make sure Tom pays you back, but could you tell me more about how the trip was planned?" I'm curious about what Tom was thinking. It dawned on me that this trip must have been meticulously planned months ago, and Tom was using me without my knowledge. In that moment, suspicions about him started to creep in. Then my mother-in-law shared a shocking revelation. The trip was actually suggested by Tom's sister and her husband. To my surprise, it was Tom's sister and her husband, who had always criticized me, who initiated the trip. Tom's brother-in-law, an executive at my rival company, he looked down on me for being a female CEO because of his pride. Tom never stood up to his sister. The sight of Tom being so attentive to someone other than himself, especially M, must have caught my sister-in-law's attention, even though she's always had Tom under her thumb. I couldn't stand the fact that she could be offended by just a slightly friendly gesture from Tom. With their strong rivalry, my sister-in-law and her husband disliked me, and I tried my best to avoid dealing with them as much as possible. The couple, always competitive and disliking me, planned this trip, possibly convincing Tom to pick a fight and exclude me. They waited for the right moment to bring Tom along as a source of money. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anything. Tom told me you were busy and asked us not to contact you directly. If my unsuspecting in-laws and I were to communicate, it would reveal the plan, potentially causing problems in our marriage." To prevent this, Tom had to restrict his parents' actions in advance. For my in-laws, who didn't understand how busy I was, Tom's advice was final. They decided to follow his instructions and express their gratitude when they returned. "Holly, did you give Tom a card or something?" "He was paying with a black card I've never seen before," my father-in-law asked, sounding hurried as if he had been eavesdropping. He brought up something that had been on my mind the moment he mentioned a black card. I checked my safe. The black card he referred to was the company's crucial black card, accessible only by Tom and me, who knew the safe's password. I never imagined Tom would stoop to embezzlement, but the card that should have been there was missing. With Tom overseeing finance, it was easy for him to manipulate records and misuse company funds. When I realized this, my anger reached its peak, and I shared the story with my in-laws. They must have been shocked. My mother-in-law turned pale and panicked, saying, "What should we do? Are we involved in this embezzlement? We'll return with Tom immediately. We're just as guilty as he is, even if unknowingly. We'll face the consequences once we're back." My father-in-law, a man of strong responsibility, said. I shook my head, rejecting his words. This was all orchestrated by Tom's sister's family and Tom himself. My in-laws are not to blame. They were just manipulated by Tom. They're not at fault, but I can't let them off the hook. We don't need punishment, but could you help me with something? I've turned a blind eye to Tom's actions until now, and that's my fault. He's taking advantage of me, thinking he can get away with just an apology. This isn't just a marital issue, it's a company issue. We need to teach him a lesson. All right, we'll do whatever we can to help. So we began plotting a revenge plan. I was surprised by my own cunning, but my love for Tom had died. Now only hatred and anger surged through me. Initially, my in-laws were hesitant about this drastic plan, but they also felt responsible for Tom as his parents, and eventually they resolved to support me. As parents, they agreed to be my allies. Amidst this discussion, Tom unexpectedly called. I ended the call with my in-laws and answered Tom's. What's up? We're enjoying a family-only trip. So what's this important talk about? Tom's sarcastic tone only fueled my irritation. You took your time calling. Did you go a little wild, huh? No way. Just having drinks at a nearby bar with mom and dad. This confirmed he was lying. I had just spoken to his parents, and there was no noise of a bar in the background. Besides, they had no reason to lie to me. His words erased all the time and trust we had built, and my feelings for him cooled entirely. Oh, really? By the way, Tom, you haven't been tampering with the company's expenses, have you? His demeanor instantly changed at my unexpected question. What's that all about? His usually light-hearted tone turned dead serious. Was this his true nature? Seeing his attitude shift as if he now saw me as an enemy, I faced him with equal firmness. Just checking since there will be an audit at the company soon. Are you suspecting me? His defensive reaction betrayed his guilt. I couldn't help but chuckle at his feeble response. What's the matter? I was just asking. And now you're talking about suspicion. Have you done something wrong? No, anyway, the house better not be a mess when I get back, okay? Realizing he was only making himself look more suspicious, he quickly changed the subject. His actions only served to raise more suspicion. I almost found his foolishness impressive. Who knows? I've been busy with work too. Cut me some slack. I hate returning to a dirty house full of bugs. They say a wife is her husband's maid. Disobey and it's divorce. Even our executive says that to his wife. Looks like I might have to do the same, huh? You wouldn't want that, so keep the house clean. I had never seen him get along with the executive. His current words were likely his own thoughts, but aware of his weaker position, he used the third person to express them. His pitiful attempt made me sigh. Sure, I'll keep that in mind. There was no need for further conversation. Tom clearly looked down on me, even resorting to embezzling company funds. Embezzlement is a serious crime, and I could report him to the police. No mercy, even for a spouse. But that alone wouldn't satisfy me. After ending the call with Tom, I immediately made a certain phone call. The next day, while busy preparing for the fashion show, I was bombarded with calls. Of course, it was Tom. I noticed his calls late at night while I was out for a reason, accompanied by my secretary. Luckily, she was driving, so I answered Tom's call. You're late. What have you been doing? His voice was more agitated than I'd ever heard, surprising both my secretary and me, who were listening on speaker. What do you mean? I was working. Did you do something yesterday? Do something like what? Don't play dumb. Tell me the truth. What did you do? Tom was in complete panic, and in the background, I could hear several Japanese men confronting him, along with my sister-in-law and her husband. Sounds noisy. Is everything okay? No, it's just... Tom, who had been blustering, suddenly began to stammer. He realized that admitting anything would put him in a very disadvantageous position. His odd behavior prompted me to reveal what I had done the day before, as it was time to make him taste despair. Too bad, Tom. You were supposed to be having a blast in Japan. But it seems your dream turned into a nightmare overnight. Huh? But it's what you deserve for misusing someone else's money. You did something, didn't you? As he reacted strangely, I disclosed my actions from the previous day. I reached out to the president of the credit card company I had a long-standing relationship with, even though it was after hours. He agreed to assist me immediately. He promptly suspended the company's credit card. When a credit card is misused, the company isn't obligated to pay the store, leaving the store at a loss. However, since Tom had arranged to pay the entire bill at checkout, with the card blocked, he couldn't settle the payment and was now facing interrogation by the hotel receptionists. Tom, Mom, and Dad have already checked out. The taxi I arranged for them has left with them. So there's no one coming to pick you up. My sister-in-law, feeling trapped, bombarded Tom, asking what to do next. Hearing this, Tom panicked even more and directed his anger at me. How could you do this and think it's okay? Are you ready for a divorce? Fine. I'd rather not be married to someone who embezzles company funds. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and we're proceeding with divorce proceedings. What? Tom was visibly shaken by my calm demeanor. I've overlooked so much of your behavior, Tom. There was a time when you supported my work, and I appreciated that. But I've reached my limit. My patience has run out. That can't be. Realizing he was in a dire situation, Tom finally understood my anger and let out a pitiful cry. The receptionist relentlessly demanded payment from Tom and his group, who were now cornered in despair. But none of them could speak Japanese, relying on a guide for communication. Listening to their plight, I suggested switching the call to me. No one there speaks Japanese, right? Let me talk to them for you. You're going to help? Of course. Tom must have thought I had a change of heart. Realizing his mistake, without hesitation, he handed his phone to them. I explained the situation to the receptionist in Japanese, and they quickly understood, seeming quite cooperative. To alleviate their concerns, I also provided them with my contact information, which my secretary noted down. They happily agreed to my proposal. After a brief conversation, they returned the phone to Tom. What happened? Did you sort it out? Yes, I've taken care of it. Now it's up to you guys. Really? You're a lifesaver, Holly. I love you. He then hurried off, apparently called by the receptionists. Clueless, Tom ended the call and followed them. Are you sure about this? It probably won't end well. Exactly. It's perfect for them to experience some hardship. An hour later, as expected, I received a barrage of calls from Tom again. When I answered, Tom's voice was filled with pitiful anguish. Holly, what's happening here? Where are we? Explain yourself and come help us right now. Crying out, he showed me via video call the image of a slum area in Osaka, Japan. The sight was shocking. Tom and his sister's family were stripped of their belongings and in a pitiful state, caught by those individuals. Being taken to what's considered the most dangerous place in Japan was honestly unexpected. When I spoke to the receptionist, he mentioned, I'm a big fan of yours. I'll arrange a harsh punishment, just leave it to me, but I never anticipated it would be this severe. I couldn't help but laugh at the unexpected turn of events. You're lucky to be alive in Japan's most dangerous place. It's quite a miracle. What? Wait, Holly, what's going on? Explain yourself and come help us right now. Since it's a video call, they could probably hear everything clearly. Surrounding Tom and his group were homeless individuals, causing a stir. You folks caused trouble for Holly. Now face the consequences. Time to reflect. My in-laws chimed in, surprising everyone. What's going on? A friend of Holly flew us back on a private jet. We're back in the US and Holly picked us up. We realized you were trying to set Holly up. We told her to do whatever she wants with you guys. As they spoke, the onlookers behind them began confronting Tom's sister and her husband. The homeless folks were ruthless. If you had anything valuable, even women weren't spared. They were shouting while on the video call. In such a dangerous place, it's no wonder they became prime targets. I addressed the crowd in Japanese, telling them loudly that these men had used my card illegally and mistreated me. Every night, I urged them to do whatever they pleased with them. The locals, eager to join in, gladly agreed to make things difficult for them. Suddenly, the call ended, perhaps because someone grabbed the phone. Tom and his group were left in the dangerous neighborhood, terrorized daily and treated like slaves by the locals. Without money to return to the US, they were essentially stuck abroad. I confirmed the subsequent events with the hotel reception. Apparently, an acquaintance of the receptionist was a boss in the area and agreed to take care of Tom and his group in exchange for me treating him to some good liquor next time, assuring me not to worry. The deal was made under the condition that they would be protected from life-threatening situations. In return, I agreed to sing at the hotel, something I hadn't done in a long time. Your live performance video was the only one you ever released when you were active. It's still my treasure. As a token of thanks, come stay at our hotel and sing for us. I'll make sure you're treated like a VIP. With the help of the men from the hotel, I successfully got revenge on Tom and his group. I also managed to divorce Tom. I felt rejuvenated and have been enjoying life with my in-laws. Tom's sister and her husband were fired for unexcused absences from work. Their phones were taken by the locals, leaving them without a means to contact anyone. My in-laws explained the situation well, so it didn't become a police matter, and no one seemed to care about them. Thus, my ties with Tom were completely severed. Since then, I've been focusing on work and living a happy life. Occasionally, I check on Tom and his group through the receptionist. They're still enduring harsh conditions, but I don't feel any sympathy for them. I asked for their lives to be spared, and now I'm relishing my life to the fullest.